Well, I think it's true that Republicans do need to have their eyes on the midterms next year, because if they lose that, then you've got a lame duck presidency, and that's not going to work well for them. He's going to do his level best to represent, frame, and portray Mamdani as an abject failure and as a commie and all the stuff that he likes to frame him as.
All right, let's now go across to our guest. Joining me on Global Pulse tonight is Professor Andrew Latham. He's a professor of political science at Macalester College. He joins us live from Minnesota in the US. Professor Latham, good to have you back on the show. First and foremost, it is clear that Donald Trump and the Republican Party have had a pretty bad day at the office. And when you compare it with the massive win that they achieved a year ago, the whole thing would seem even more disappointing and painful. Do you believe the 4th of November, and especially Zohran Mamdani's historic win, have in many ways punctured Donald Trump's aura of invincibility? At least the man thought he couldn't lose.
Yes, well, I think Donald Trump himself has punctured his own aura of invincibility. He's had a tumultuous year plus, to say the least. There have been ups and there have been downs. Polling clearly indicates that Republicans were blamed for the government shutdown. I think mistakenly, but it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the vast majority of Americans think. It has to be said in New York City that Andrew Cuomo was not exactly the most popular candidate to be running against Mamdani. And of course, the vote was split between Sliwa and Cuomo. It didn't matter in the end because Mamdani won 50 plus 0.1%, something like that. He would have won even if there had only been one candidate running against him. And so if you look at New York City as a microcosm for what took place in Virginia and across the country recently in this election, we can see that it has to be said, too, that Donald Trump wasn't, in fact, on the ballot. And that actually matters. But if we sort of control for that, it still seems clear that his message isn't resonating, especially with minorities who had been migrating towards the Republican Party, racialized minorities, religious minorities. They seem to have reverted back to the Democrats in many cases. And then there's just the fact that he is, I'm going to be charitable here, somewhat abrasive in his political persona, which puts a lot of people off, even if it mobilizes some people. So you put all of these factors together, and it's a very complicated picture, but it doesn't surprise me that things didn't go well for the Republicans yesterday, and for Donald Trump in particular. And of course, he's reacting the way one might expect. He's lashing out in a, to be charitable, somewhat petulant way.
He's lashing out, being uncharitable and acting petulant. Well, that's just Donald Trump for you, isn't it? But, to look at the big picture and the message that has emerged from the 4th of November, there are two schools of thought on this. There are those who say that this should be a wake-up call for Donald Trump and the Republicans as they prepare for the midterms next year, because it's not just Zohran Mamdani who defeated the Republican candidate and the candidate endorsed by Donald Trump in the New York mayoral election. The Democrats pretty much swept every election on the 4th of November. And then there are those who say that the Democrats shouldn't get carried away by these wins. After all, these wins have come from what are already deep blue cities and states, perhaps with the exception of Virginia. Correct me there if I'm wrong. So how do you look at it? What really are the big takeaways from the 4th of November?
Well, I think it's true that Republicans do need to have their eyes on the midterms next year, because if they lose that, then you've got a lame duck presidency, and that's not going to work well for them. So the other thing, though, to bear in mind is that the Democratic Party is internally divided between the traditional Democrats, who are very working class oriented, and then this progressive wing that Mamdani represents and embodies in some ways. And right now it looks that, at least in New York City, the Mamdani progressive social democrat side, democratic socialist side, is prevailing. But that's not going to play well across the country. And so, the Democrats have to sort out what party they actually are and what their natural constituency and base is. And on the other side, the Republicans have to figure out a new message. It's interesting that in ways that I don't really approve of, Donald Trump and his administration have kind of solved the border problem. The numbers crossing illegally into this country have gone way, way, way down, which means that people who were mobilized by that issue are no longer mobilized by that issue, because in their minds it might have been resolved. So the Republicans have got to get a better message. I think it's going to have to be a message that doesn't rely on Donald Trump. And they're going to have to hope that the Democratic Party doesn't resolve its internal contradictions and tensions and kind of falls apart on its own, and that they can therefore capitalize on that and carry the day when the midterm elections roll around. That's a lot of ifs upon which to build a strategy and a plan. And, a plan is not a promise. They have to be adaptable as well as circumstances change between now and the next election cycle.
So let me ask you this, talking about the big message that these elections carry for Donald Trump and the Republicans. Now, Trump's own analysis is as follows. The Republicans lost because, well, he was not on the ballot. Chances are he will never be on the ballot again. 2, the government shutdown. He believes that that was a huge factor. 3, he says the Republicans are too silent on his administration's economic accomplishments, as he puts it. Do you agree with any of that analysis? Or again, these are big accomplishments only in Donald Trump's head? Because many have appeared on this show and said that perhaps one big reason why the Republicans were wiped out in these elections is because Donald Trump has actually neglected the economy.
Yes, and I think most people aren't experiencing the economic upturn that Donald Trump talks about. He's accomplished some things. Every president does. He wasn't on the ballot. I think that's fair enough. The Republicans did not have much of a message other than, kind of, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. But in fact, for many Americans, the experience day to day is, well, it is broken. Especially for people in New York City who are not amongst the 1% super wealthy. The cost of living is extraordinarily high, and it's not gotten any cheaper under Donald Trump. But that's true across the country as well. Inflation rates are down, but the inflated prices that were as a result of inflation in the past, they haven't gone down. And so what was Donald Trump running on? Most Americans don't care that he's making peace between Azerbaijan and whomever. They just don't care. I think he had some case to be made that he was a peacemaker, certainly of a sort, but that message doesn't resonate with your average American. They're looking at kitchen table issues. They're looking at what it costs to feed their family, what it costs to put their kids through school, what health insurance is going to cost if they have health insurance. Those are the kind of things they're interested in. And Donald Trump simply wasn't able, the Republicans weren't able to make the case that Donald Trump had delivered on any of those things. And so when you add all that up, it's easy to say in retrospect, but some of us said it looking forward a few days ago, the Republicans were going to suffer a resounding defeat, and they really did.
They really did. So what, according to you, are the big takeaways for the Republicans as they look ahead at the midterms? Many of them are sort of consoling themselves by saying these were deep blue cities and states anyway, not a big deal. But clearly, the voters here have a message for Donald Trump and the Republicans, don't they?
Yes. I think, number one, you have to have good candidates. Glenn Youngkin, who was term limited, he was the governor of Virginia, very right of center, not quite Trumpian, but certainly on the Republican right. And he wasn't allowed to run again. And so his successor, a Republican, was defeated by a Democrat. That need not have happened. If they had positioned her, the Republican candidate, better and drawn on Youngkin's record. So what I'm saying is that personalities matter. You have to have good candidates, first of all. You have to have good issues that actually resonate with the majority of people. Yes, you're probably never going to win New York City. And there's a few other blue places, but there are lots of red places where you have to hold on to power, and lots of purple constituencies, sometimes red, sometimes blue. Some of those are trending more blue, some trending more red, but those are seats that can be won for the House and for the Senate, and they'll contribute to the Electoral College and the presidency down the road. you have to be mindful. I have to believe that there are strategists in Republican circles who are looking at this, looking forward, reading the tea leaves, as it were, and coming up with a strategic plan that capitalizes on their real strengths. They have things to offer, minimizes their real weaknesses, and they have a lot of weaknesses, and better positions them if they hope to win. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay. Going by some of the commentary that one has read since these election results came out, there's a contrarian view as well. And I'd like to have your thoughts on this. There are those who say that while the Republicans are obviously not happy with these election results, Zohran Mamdani is actually a man who could end up benefiting the Republican Party in the long run if the Republicans play their cards right. There are those who argue that if Donald Trump is able to project Zohran Mamdani as the face and the future of the Democratic Party, project him as some sort of a super villain, he's called him a communist lunatic, and say, well, this is what you're going to get if you're not going to vote us in the midterms and the other elections. So the argument being that Zohran Mamdani can actually be used as a bogeyman by Donald Trump and Republicans to scare many American voters into voting for the Republican Party. What's your view on this argument that's being made by some?
I think it's a fear that is shared by people on the more traditional end of the Democratic Party, that now that he's in power, the rhetoric is going to be off-putting to a lot of people. The symbolism, his all-female transition team, for example, that's fine, but he's making a big deal of it. That's going to work with some people, and it's not going to work with other people. So at the level of rhetoric and symbolism, he's going to be off-putting. And then, and this is the big thing, will he be able to deliver what he has promised? Or will he run up against structural impediments, structural speed bumps and roadblocks, pick your metaphor, that mean that he can't do what he wants to do, that things might get worse in New York City? And then the Republicans and some Democrats who don't favor that wing of their own party can say, look, this isn't working. Vote differently within the Democratic Party. Let's shift our center of gravity. And then for the Republicans, vote for us because we offer a real alternative to the likes of Mamdani and his progressive democratic socialist crowd. I think that's the Democrats' big hope. I think that's the big fear of, the Republicans' big hope. The Democrats on the traditional wing, that's their big fear. And it's something the Mamdani team must be saying. They're looking over their shoulder. We can't fall into those traps. Maybe he'll moderate his rhetoric now that he's won. Maybe he'll have more modest, concrete objectives, and he'll achieve some of them, and that will take the wind out of some of these arguments against him. Again, we'll have to wait and see. It's very early days. My inner pessimist is telling me that he's likely to fail rather than succeed, and that is not good because that's going to hurt the people of New York.
That's going to hurt the people of New York. And in fact, talking about the divisions in the Democratic Party, if you look at it, Barack Obama never endorsed Zohran Mamdani. And even when he put out a tweet congratulating the Democrats who've won these elections, he did not even name Zohran Mamdani. Then, there is Hakeem Jeffries, who, when asked, is Zohran Mamdani the future of the Democratic Party, categorically said no. So it would almost seem as if there are many, perhaps some even in the Democratic Party, who are waiting for Zohran Mamdani to fail. So my question is, how difficult do you believe Donald Trump is going to make life for Zohran Mamdani and New Yorkers?
Well, again, if we look at it rhetorically and symbolically, he's going to do his level best to represent, frame, and portray Mamdani as an abject failure and as a commie and all the stuff that he likes to frame him as. In terms of concrete policy, this is not, the president's powers in this country are limited constitutionally. The Supreme Court now has sort of slapped him back a little bit. There's not really much he can do directly, concretely, in terms of policy to harm New York City or to harm Mamdani. That's not going to stop him, A, from trying, And B, it's not going to stop him from talking about Mamdani in a particular way, trying to frame him as this woke, left-leaning, progressive commie who failed in New York City. I think we're going to hear a lot of that coming from President Trump. It's ironic because if Trump succeeds and vilifies Mamdani, he's going to empower part of the Democratic Party, which may in fact do very well because of that in the next election cycle, and the next presidential election cycle too. So be careful what you wish for, President Trump.
Okay, final question before we let you go, Professor Latham. Some of the threats that Donald Trump has issued in the run-up to this election included cutting off federal funding to New York if Mamdani won, and even mulling the possibility of sending in the National Guard troops. Do you believe it could actually come to that?
I do believe that with respect to the block grants, that he might try that, but the Constitution is quite clear that he doesn't have the authority, and the laws are quite clear that that kind of political interference is not acceptable under the law. His job is to execute the laws, not to make the laws. And I think he's going to be blocked there. Now, when it comes to federalizing the National Guard and deploying them to the streets, he's done that in a number of cities and gotten away with it. There's been some pushback. I'm not sure that where those troops are deployed, that isn't always popular. The way it appears to people outside of those cities, in red states and in red constituencies, sometimes that appeals to them. It looks like Donald Trump is doing something to address crime. It doesn't really have that effect, but it looks to those people like it is. So in terms of block grants and those kind of policies, I think the law and the Constitution will stymie him. In terms of symbolism, he's going to do a lot. And one of those symbolic things might be to deploy, even if only a handful, some federalized state National Guard troops to the streets of New York City.
He's threatened to do it. Who's to say that he will not carry out his threat? I think one thing we can agree on is that while it's been an absolutely stupendous and historic win for Zohran Mamdani, he has his task cut out for him. Professor Andrew Latham, thank you so much for speaking to me on Global Pulse.